Hi, this is Jeff Mann, and I'm doing a new recording for my video project. This is going to be episode number 11. Now, I recently did episode 9, where I discussed two of the worst videos ever produced by the AMG instructors. And in episode 10, I discussed what I thought was one of the best videos ever produced by the AMG instructors. And I posted these two video presentations to my YouTube channel on August the 13th. Then on August the 13th, I happened to look again at the AMG channel, because I keep on following what the AMG instructors produce. And I noticed that they'd produced a new video, and this image that you can see here, the secret to more speed, also called Unlock Hidden Speed Hiding Inside of You, was presented as their most recent video. So I looked at the video and I was in a state of shock, because I thought that this video is one of the most wrong-headed videos that the AMG instructors have ever produced. And I was thinking to myself when I watched this video that maybe I could nominate this video as being the worst video that the AMG instructors have ever produced. And I'm going to explain, when I analyze this video, why I have such a negative opinion of the thinking and demonstrations that the AMG instructors manifested during this video. Now, I have provided a link to this video in the info section of my own video. If the link doesn't work, you just need to copy this title here in YouTube search engine here, paste it there, and you should be able to find the video. Now, in this video, the AMG instructors are talking about speed, as you can see here. And one of the points of view they express at the very beginning of the video is that to create speed, you've got to get the speed out to the club head. So in the early downswing, a professional golfer retains a club head lag angle of about 90 degrees in the early mid downswing to roughly about P5.5. Then in the later downswinging, they release the club. Now, what the AMG instructors said, that to get the club to release, you have to transfer energy from the body and the feet. They even talked about somehow your interaction of the feet in the ground creates energy and your body has energy. And then you have to get this energy out to the club head during the release phase. And the release phase in TGM terms is called the release of power accumulator number 2, which is the release of the club so that it can catch up to your lead arm by impact with a small amount of forward shaft lean, if that's what you desire. Now, critical to the AMG instructors' thinking is that this is only possible if you slow your lead arm down in the later downswing. So what the AMG instructors presented, if you watch the first few minutes of the video, they talk about a golfer, an amateur golfer, whose grip speed, and remember grip speed and lead hand speed are essentially equivalent. And they said that he wasn't hitting the ball well because his grip speed reached the maximum speed at impact. And they say that this doesn't happen in professional golfers. They said that a professional golfer will have his maximum lead hand speed roughly between P 5.3 and 5.5. And then they said to get the energy out to the club, the grip speed needs to slow down. Now, I believe this is a fallacy. In a future video, I will discuss how professional golfers release the club. In other words, what are they doing at the level of the club handle with their hands in terms of generating forces and torques to perform a club release phenomenon. As I said, TGM terms, it's referred to as the release of power accumulator number 2. But I think it's oversimplistic to think that it happens simply because a professional golfer slows the grip speed down in the later downswing between roughly P5.5 and impact. So I'm going to go to the next image. And I'm going to share this image with you. So this image here comes from gears data, where gears were performed on Rory, McIlroy, and Dustin Johnson. Notice that the maximum grip speed in Rory McIlroy's golf swing when swinging a driver was 25 miles an hour, roughly at the P5.5 position. Here at the P6.5 position, you'll notice his grip speed had slowed down to 21.5 miles an hour. And then by impact at the P7 position, his grip speed had dropped down to 20.3 miles an hour, which means that his grip speed had diminished by 25%, which seems comparable with what the AMG instructors stated. However, here is Dustin Johnson, and you'll notice that his maximum grip speed at P5.5 was 26.7 miles an hour, and then by the time he gets to P6.5, it's still very fast, 25.4 miles per hour, and at impact, it's 25.1 miles per hour. And this image here is captured from Dustin Johnson's gear image, and in the bottom here is grip speed, and here is impact, and here, at this point where the grip speed reaches its maximum value, it's at P5.5, but it stays very fast all the way to impact. This is a negligible diminishment of grip hand speed. So then the question becomes, how does Dustin Johnson succeed in squaring his face with perfection, not squaring the face, releasing the club so that the club shaft catches up to his lead arm by impact with such a great deal of efficiency if he's not slowing his lead hand speed, his grip speed, in the later downswing between P5.5 and P7. And I will discuss this in another video where I will talk about what professional golfers actually do at the level of the club handle in terms of forces and torques being exerted by the hands, the two hands at grip level, that allows them to efficiently release the club. But I'm not going to spend time in this topic in this video presentation talking about the club release phenomenon. I'm going to discuss the issue that the AMG instructors discussed. So I'm going to go to the next image, and I'm going to share this image. So in this video presentation by the AMG instructors, they were saying that the way to perform a late downswing action is you need, in the late downswing, when you're trail elbow gets close to your trail hip area, you need to start internally rotating your trail upper arm and therefore pronating your trail forearm, as you can see here. In this image here, and you need to watch the video yourself to see what I'm talking about, Shaun Webb states that as you perform this motion, where you internally rotate your trail upper arm and allow your forearm to rotate in the manner that you can see here, you must feel like the trail elbow moves outwards and away from the body. And here's a picture, number 3, of how he perceives a professional golfer looks at impact. Notice at impact he has his trail elbow still outside his hip, but look at the orientation of his trail forearm. Notice that it's angled inwards towards the club handle, and his trail upper arm is internally rotated, and he looks like he's performing a trail forearm pronatory action. Now, I'm going to go to the next image, and I'm going to share this image of you of Mike Granato, basically saying the same thing. So here's Mike Granato demonstrating what he calls a stone skipping action. And he believes that this should never be performed in the laid down swing in a professional quality golf swing action. He says if you perform an action like that, you'll end up looking like this through impact, where the arms are angled like that, the two elbows are close together, and he says that will lead to too much forward shaft lean. He also claims that this action, where you perform a right arm with a trail arm, a stone skipping action, will also not only result in your trail arm looking like that, he says it would actually cause the lead upper arm to rotate clockwise, like you can see here. And he says this is a disaster to perform a golf swing in this manner. So what Mike Granato and Shaun Webb are promoting is a trail arm and trail forearm motion as depicted here. And Mike Granato, if you watch the video, when he performs this action, he calls it a right arm throw action, not a right arm stone skipping action. And in the throw action, he says that you should end up looking like this. And you can see his trail upper arm is internally rotated. You can look at this arm, it looks like his trail forearm is pronated. Now, I don't see any professional golfer ever coming to impact looking anything like this. Now, Mike Granato says that this looks much closer to what happens in a professional golfer. He's not saying that they come into impact exactly like that, because he says in a professional golf swing, the golfer is rotating the pelvis and the upper torso counterclockwise, so they come into impact open. But what he's saying is the arm motion will look like this. And he says the arm motion will never look like this in a professional golfer. And he says if you do this motion, like here, stone skipping motion as in image 1, and you go through impact looking like this in image 3, you're doing something that doesn't exist in great golfers. And I'm quoting him directly. So let's start looking at some great PGA Tour golfers. So I'm going to go to the next image, and I'm going to share this tab of Dustin Johnson. So here's Dustin Johnson's laid down swing. Here he is at P6, P6.5, and here he is at impact. Notice the motion of his trail arm. At his P6 position, you'll notice that his trail upper arm is minimally externally rotated, and that angles his trail forearm slightly in this direction. Notice that his trail forearm is markedly supinated. I've drawn a red line over his trail forearm's lower radial bone, and the blue line's drawn down the middle of the trail antecubital fossa and trail upper arm. And this red line is rotated clockwise relative to the blue line, so he's markedly supinated. Notice that his arm, let's consider his arm motion. As he gets to P6.5, you can see that his elbow is moving more in front of his trail hip joint area, and at impact, it's there in front of the trail hip. Notice that his trail forearm remains continuously supinated. Notice in this image, there is no evidence that his trail elbow is moving in the way that Shaun Webb demonstrated, where it sort of rotates outwards away from the body. I don't see this happening. That's definitely not happening in this image. Now you might say, well, this Dustin Johnson's an outlier, because, you know, Mike Granato said there are some outliers who don't perform the arm action as they prescribe. So let's go to the next image. And here's an image of Rory McIlroy. And in the AMG video, they actually refer to Rory McIlroy as being an example of a golfer who does the trail arm action in the manner they describe. So let's look to see if that's really true. Image 1 here is Rory McIlroy at his P6 position. And you'll notice that in contrast to Dustin Johnson, when Rory McIlroy gets to P6, notice that his trail elbow here is away from his body. There's an air gap here between his trail elbow and the trail side of his mid-torso. Then notice that by P6.5 and P7, the forearm is getting angled inwards towards this direction. And that can only happen if he has a certain amount of internal rotation of his trail upper arm. And I haven't got the picture of his trail upper arm in these images, but that is in fact happening. And that allows Rory McIlroy to angle his trail forearm towards the target. But most importantly, look at his trail forearm. Notice it remains supinated throughout this time period. And notice that if you look at his trail elbow motion, from P6 it moves closer towards his torso and ends up very close to his trail shirt seam, just outside his trail hip joint area by impact. But in no time during this P6 to P7 time period does his trail elbow rotate outwards away from the body in the manner that Shaun Webb demonstrated in the AMG video. So I'm pointing Rory McIlroy as being at the extreme, where he is totally different to Dustin Johnson. But let's look at what the majority of pro golfers are doing. So I'm going to go to the next image, and this is an image of Scotty Scheffler. So image 1 is Scotty Scheffler at P6, image 2 at P6.5, and here image 3 is at impact. Notice when Scotty Scheffler gets to the P6 position, his trail upper arm is minimally externally rotated, and that angles his trail forearm slightly away from the target relative to his trail upper arm. And then as he gets closer to impact, notice he doesn't really internally rotate his arm. So at impact, I think his trail upper arm is neutral. So it's moving from a small degree of external rotation, becoming less externally rotated here by P6.5, and by impact, it's neutral. But it's not internally rotated. The other thing, if you look at his trail forearm, it is continuously supinated throughout his P6 to P7 time period. There is no time period that Scotty Scheffler performs a trail arm action in the manner that the AMG instructors describe, where you markedly internally rotate your trail upper arm and you get the back of your trail forearm to be facing the camera. You can see here that his arm is still facing the camera, his upper forearm. It hasn't rotated close. And if you look at his trail elbow motion here at P6, as he goes to P6.5, there is no evidence that the trail elbow is rotating outwards in the manner Shaun Webb demonstrated. Now, I'm going to go to the next image. And this here is an image of Will Zalatoris. So here he is at P6, here he is at P6.5, and here he is at impact. Notice that he's very similar to Scotty Scheffler. If you look at him at P6, his trail upper arm looks minimally externally rotated, which angles his forearm in this direction. At P6.5, it looks like his trail upper arm is neutral, and over here it's neutral. There is no time point when he actually internally rotates his trail upper arm in the manner that Mike Granato said you had to do. Mike Granato described a throw action with a trail arm where he internally rotated his arm, and where you look at the back of his wrist and the back of his forearm and it's facing the camera. And you can see Will Zalatoris is not doing that at all. Notice that his forearm is supinated throughout his entire P6 to P7 time period. So I'll go to the next image. And I'm going to share this tab, which is Matthew Fitzpatrick. And again, here's Matthew Fitzpatrick at the P6 position, P6.5 in image 2, and then at impact. Look at Matthew Fitzpatrick at P6. In contrast to Scotty Scheffler or Dustin Johnson or Will Zalatoris, his trail upper arm looks neutral. It's not externally rotated. So at his P6 position, you can see his trail forearm is angled in this direction, more towards the target. It's not angled to the right, away from the target. And then notice that he does have a certain degree of internal rotation of his trail upper arm between P6 and P7. But although he's rotating it in the manner that Mike Granato said you should perform a right arm throw motion, notice that his trail forearm remains markedly supinated. And he's not doing a throw motion where the forearm rotates so much counterclockwise that if you look at it from a face-on viewing perspective, you can only see the back of his forearm and the back of his wrist in the manner that Mike Granato demonstrated. That's not happening. Notice that his trail elbow, as it moves from P6 to here, I can see no evidence that his trail elbow is rotating outwards in the manner they describe. I can see, yes, he's internally rotating his trail upper arm here, But that doesn't spin his trail elbow outwards in the manner that Mike Granato and Shaun Webb demonstrate. Now, when a golfer goes through impact with this orientation, just look how it looks like. This doesn't look like the way Mike Granato said most professional golfers look. I think this looks more like a golfer who is going to go through impact and keep the arms extended outwards in the way that Mike Granato says that doesn't exist in great golf swings. So I'm going to show you a few examples of that. I'm going to go to the next image. So this is an image of Dustin Johnson. So here he is at impact, and here he is at P7.3 roughly. Notice what he looks like. Notice that the two arms are moving towards the target in such a manner that Mike Granato would say, this doesn't happen in great golfers. But Dustin Johnson's a great golfer. The other thing that Mike Granato says, that if you go through impact like this, where you keep the elbow moving across the body, and if you keep your trail forearm supinated, that will force your trail upper arm to rotate counterclockwise and become open. But that's not happening in Dustin Johnson's swing. Notice here, he's well past impact, and his lead humerus is still internally rotated. Let me give you another example. Here is an image of Cameron Champ. And you can see here he is at impact in image 1, and image 2 is at P7.2, and in image 3 is at P7.4. Notice that he's performing his arm action through impact into the early follow-through in the exact same way that Dustin Johnson is doing it, right? Notice that his elbow is moving across his body more as he gets into the follow-through. Notice that he's not grossly internally rotating his trail upper arm. Notice that his trail forearm here in image 3, even at P7.4, is still supinated. Notice that his trail palm is still partially under the club handle and behind the club handle. He doesn't look at all like the image that Mike Granato was demonstrating, where the arm rotated so much internally that the back of the hand was facing the camera. Here you can see his trail hand in image 3, which is well past impact, is still partially under the club handle and partially behind the club handle. Look at his lead upper arm. It's internally rotated here at impact and it's still internally rotated. So it's a fallacy to believe what Mike Granato is stating, that this type of release action, which I define as a drive hold hand release action, where the club shaft does not bypass your lead arm in the early follow-through between P7 and P7.4. This is a very frequently used type of hand release action used by professional golfers. And Cameron Champ's a great golfer. The other thing that Mike Granato argues, that if you go through impact like this, he almost implies that this is handle dragging and therefore you're not going to hit the ball very far. But Cameron Champ and Dustin Johnson, who performs a similar type of release action of the arms through impact, are two of the longest hitters on the PGA Tour. It makes no sense what Mike Granato is saying. Let me go to the next image. Here's an image of Jordan Spieth. So here's Jordan Spieth at impact. Here he is at P7.2 in image 2, and here he is at P7.5 in image 3. Notice how he's moving his arms. His lead arm is moving towards the target continuously. Notice that his elbow which was close to his trail hip joint area, trail shirt seam at impact, is moving away from it. By the time he gets to P7.4, look how far his trail elbow has moved targetwards as he stretches out his arm. Notice that he's still supinated, his trail form supinated in all these images, which allows him to keep his trail palm more under the club handle. And yet, Mike Granato says if you perform a golf swing like this, you'll never be a great golfer. And Jordan Spieth is obviously a great golfer. Let's go to the next image. So this is an image of Justin Thomas. And look at Justin Thomas. Here he is at impact, image 1. Here he is at about P7.4 in image 2, and there he looks like he's probably in image 3 at P7.6. So look what he's doing through impact. Notice that he's not stalling his lead arm in the manner that Mike Granato and Shaun Webb say you have to stall the lead arm and let the trail arm roll over, so to speak. Notice that his elbow, which was close to his trail hip joint area and close to his trail shirt seam at impact, is still moving targetwards as in the early follow-through. Note that his trail form is still supinated. Here at P7.4, notice that his trail palm is still partially under and behind the club handle. It never rolls over the club handle. And notice that he's not, his arm at impact, his lead upper arm is less internally rotated compared to the previous golfers that I demonstrated. But it doesn't rotate more as a result of him performing this type of release action with his arms through impact. So here's another example of a professional golfer who's a great golfer and is performing this type of arm release action, which Mike Granato says is incompatible with a great professional golf swing action. I'm going to the next image. So here's another image. This is Victor Hovland. So here's Victor Hovland at impact, and there's Victor Hovland at the P7.4 position. Notice that he's using a drive hold hand release action. So between impact and P7.4, the club shaft is still roughly in line with his lead forearm. Notice his elbow motion. You can see that his elbow is moving towards the target. Notice that his trail forearm remains supinated at impact, still supinated here. Notice that his trail palm is partially under the club handle and behind the club handle. Yes, so he has another great professional golfer who's not doing what Mike Granato says all professional golfers are doing. I'm going to the next image, and I'll share this image with you. And here's Will Zalatoris. So Will Zalatoris, here he is at impact, here he is at about P7.4, there he is at P7.7. Notice between impact and P7.4, he looks like all the other examples I've given. His elbow, because he's so flexible and he gets his trail pelvis so open at impact, you'll notice that his trail elbow doesn't bypass his trail shirt seam and his trail hip joint area between P7 and P7.4. But notice how supinated his trail forearm is at impact, and he's still supinated here. Notice that his trail palm is partially under the club handle, behind the club handle. So I'm giving you an incredible number of examples of this phenomenon where, according to Mike Granato, if you perform an arm motion like Will Zalatoris here, you couldn't possibly be a great golfer, and he would say, oh, this is just an exception. But I find that there are many professional golfers who just perform a drive, hold, hand release action in the manner that I've been demonstrating. I'll now go to the next image. And I'll share this tab. And this will be the last tab. Now, this image here comes from episode number 10. And in episode number 10, I described what I thought was the best AMG video that they have ever produced, where Shaun Webb performs a lead arm only swing. And what he does is he uses what he calls a ghost trail arm, where he puts his flat trail hand with the fingers outstretched against the back of his club handle. And here he is at P6 in image 1, here he is at P6.5 in image 2, and here he is at impact. Notice where his elbow is at P6, it's alongside his trail shirt seam. Notice it's moving marginally towards the target across the front of his trail shirt seam between P6 and impact. And according to Shaun Webb and Mike Granato in this latest video, they say this should never happen. It should actually move outwards. They say the trail elbow should move outwards as you start to internally rotate the trail upper arm in the later downswing. But look at his arm. Notice here, his trail humerus, trail upper arm, is relatively neutral. It's still neutral here, and even at impact, it's neutral. I can see no evidence that in his real-life golf swing as performed here by Shaun Webb, that he's internally rotating his trail upper arm. Also note how he keeps his forearm supinated throughout his entire late downswing, all the way from P6 to P7. When he comes into impact, look at the orientation of his forearm. This is like all the other golfers I've showed you, like Scotty Scheffler, Dustin Johnson, Will Zalatoris, Justin Thomas. I could go on and on. This is a perfect way to perform the golf swing. He's not performing the golf swing in the manner that the AMG instructors described in the latest video. I think this is a perfect way to perform a golf swing. And I think the majority of professional golfers do it as demonstrated by Shaun Webb in this image. Now I'm going to stop sharing images and I'm going to go and turn on my camera. So here I am, and I've stopped sharing image. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a number of demonstrations as I usually do. So let's consider what Mike Granato and Shaun Webb were saying. They stated, and they were referring to this amateur golfer, and they said he got to a position like this, and they said, well, that's a pretty perfect position. Notice that my trail upper arm is relatively neutral. Notice I'm supinated at this position, because if you shallow your club shaft, you have to be supinated there. Then they said that this golfer made the mistake of going into impact like this. And he got to impact where his lead hand speed was faster than it was at P5.5. And they said that's a mistake. And I agree that if you do that, you'll never be able to complete the release of the club so that it can catch up to the lead arm at impact. If you come to this position and you come into impact like, let me stand further away, in other words, your lead grip speed here is, let's say, 20 miles an hour. And if you get into impact and it's faster, you'll end up looking like this, which is a disaster, because you've got too much forward shaft lean and the club face is too open, and you're going to hit a lot of push slices. So I agree with Mike Granato and Shaun Webb, and they say when you get to this position, you're going to have to, in a sense, allow the club to catch up to the arm. So watch me do it with the lead arm. So you release the club, and if you have a weak grip like I'm demonstrating, like Scotty Scheffler, as you release the club, you're going to have to supinate your lead lower forearm in the very end of your late downswing between P6.5 and P7 to square the face. That's the lead. But what Mike Granato and Shaun Webb demonstrated, they said, this is what you have to do. So you're here, and they seem to agree that this is okay position. But then they say, you need to do this motion. Watch this. And they say, as you do this, your elbow moves outwards away from your body. And then you look like this. An internally rotated trail upper arm, the back of your forearms facing the camera and your back of your hands facing the camera. I regard that as a nonsensical idea, because look at all the golfers I've talked about. They're here and they keep their forearms supinated. In other words, if you go to episode 1 of my video project, I produced a graph by John Sinclair who showed that the majority of professional golfers supinate their trail forearm from the end backswing position here to the P6 position. They supinate it, and that's necessary to shallow the club shaft. The amount of supination will vary. So if you shallow the club shaft a lot, you'll look more like this with your trail palm under the club handle. If you don't shallow it that much, it will look less under the club handle, more behind the club handle. Another factor is your trail hand grip. So for instance, if you use a strong trail hand grip like Dustin Johnson, you're going to look more like this at the P6 position. By contrast, Scotty Scheffler, when he uses a weak trail hand grip, he looks like that. It's still partially under, but it's more like this, not like that. Now from here to impact, all these professional golfers that I've ever examined do this motion. I've never seen a professional golfer pronate the forearm like I'm demonstrating. Look what it does to the trail palm. It makes it face the ground. Everyone I've seen looks like this, right? Now, as I said, there can be a variance. So Dustin Johnson, he gets here, and you can see he's still externally rotated his arm. And from here to impact, he looks like that. While Rory McIlroy comes down in his downswing, and he keeps his shoulders more closed by the time he gets to P6. So at P6, he looks like this. And then because his shoulders are closed, and then as he comes towards impact, this arm internally rotates more. But even though it's internally rotating more, he keeps his forearm supinated like that. So when you look at Rory McIlroy, he looks like this at impact. Yes, his trail upper arm is more internally rotated compared to, let's say, Dustin Johnson or Will Zalatoris. But in terms of his forearm motion, it looks like this. He never looks like this. So with this motion that the AMG instructors claim that all professional golfers are doing, I've never seen it. Now, it could be that I'm ignorant. So if the AMG instructors have a whole collection, they always claim they have all these collected gears images and other data from 3D which show what professional golfers are doing. Well, present them. I want to see examples of, say, 3 to 5 professional golfers who do this, where they internally rotate their arm and they look like this at impact. I mean, the image that Mike Granato demonstrated was ridiculous. He came like this and he said, rotate and look like this. The left wrist was bent, the club had bypassed the arm. And he says, well, that's just an amateur golfer, but he said if you do the same arm motion, but you rotate your body like that, you'll look like this. Okay, look at this. Show me a professional golfer who looks like this, where the trail forearm is pronated, where the palm is facing the ground at impact like that. In the way they demonstrate. They talk about covering the ball with a motion like this. I've looked at many professional golf swings, and I've not seen this. The closest I've seen to this type of pattern is in a small subset of professional golfers who use what's called the on-top pattern of performing a golf swing. So, and a good example of that would be Angel Cabrera, Mark Leishman, Patrick Reed. So they use a very weak trail hand grip. And when they take the trail hand back in the backswing, they end up more with a flying elbow and their trail upper arms angle like this instead of being like this. And when they come down a steep path like this, and then they come down a steep path, yes, they do look somewhat similar to what Mike Granato and Shaun Webb are saying, where this arm would be internally rotated. But even Angel Cabrera and Patrick Reed and Mark Leishman, their forearms are still supinated. At no time do they look like this. So when Mike Granato says, this is how you perform a swing, you throw the trail arm in this manner, like this. He says you should never perform a stone skipping motion. He says you've got to do it this way. I'm not seeing that. Am I missing something? I mean, if you as a viewer are watching this video, do you disagree with me and that you have substantial scientific evidence that professional golfers are doing this type of motion? Then show me 5 to 10 examples so that I can examine them. If that turns out to be the case, I'd be happy to eat humble pie and say I was wrong, and I'll publish those 5 to 10 examples of professional golfers who are doing this in another episode. But I haven't seen it. I look for examples, I can see it, I cannot see it. To me, a stone skip in action like I'm demonstrating here, where in a golfer who's like Scotty Scheffler, who shuttles the club shaft, he's supinated here, goes into impact looking like that. This looks much more like a stone skip in action. And then going through impact, it's optional. Yes, I do agree, you can come into impact like this, and you could just roll your hands into a reverse swivel like that. But many professional golfers prefer when they get into impact like this. I'll stand further away. They prefer to keep moving like this through impact. This is not handle dragging. This is simply the club at impact. Let's say the club at speed is 120 miles an hour at impact. They are just simply letting the club still maintain its speed. And they're just moving their arm so that it matches the angular velocity of the club. And then this arm, which was supinated at impact, looks like that. So I gave you many images. Dustin Johnson looks like that. Will Zalatoris looks like that. Justin Thomas looks like that. Cameron Champ looks like that. Jordan Spieth looks like that. It's inconceivable to me that this motion, which I'm demonstrating, Mike Granato says never happens in great professional golfers. I'm now going to demonstrate another point. This will be the final point. And that is this motion. So I'll do it first with a club and then I'm going to do it with a racket. So here is the P6 position. So Shaun Webb said, and I'm going to do it with the trail arm, he says, now what you need to do is you need to internally rotate your arm, you see, and get the elbow to move out like I'm demonstrating. And then you come looking like this, where the back of your forearm is facing the camera in the back of your hand. And he says that this motion is what's used to square the face. Now, when we talk of squaring the face, maybe he has a different definition to me. When I talk about squaring the face, I'm talking about squaring the face not relative to the ball target line, but relative to the club head arc. So let's look at Scotty Scheffler. Scotty Scheffler uses a weak lead hand grip, which means if you look at him here, the club face is parallel to the back of his flat looking wrist, which I call a geometrically flat left wrist. So he's at P5.5, club face is open. He has to square it by impact, right? Now the way he does it, watch, he starts to release the club, but by P6.5, where he's already released the club, the back of his lead hand is still facing the camera and facing the ball target line, and it's moving parallel to his functional swing plane. Then between P6.5 and impact, he performs a lead forearm supinatory action. Look at my watch face, how it rotates to face the target, and then the club face will be square. During that time period, he's not using his trail arm to do that. Now, could you use your trail arm to do that? So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do it actually with a racket because it's easier for you to see this. So here I am with a, like Scotty Scheffler, a weak lead hand grip. In the backswing, he pronates his forearm to get on the plane to the end backswing. During the early mid downswing, he keeps the back of his geometrically flat left wrist and the club shaft on his plane as he shallows the club till he gets to here. From this position, as I said, he's going to release the club, and then in the end position, he's going to rotate the club face to square it. Now, could you do this with the trail arm? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to that position, and I'm now going to hold it with like this. Notice it's angled about 45 degrees. Now, according to Shaun Webb, he said to square the face with the trail arm, all you need to do is internally rotate your upper arm like this, and it'd be squared. But look, still 45 degrees open. In other words, an internally rotation of the trail upper arm, so it's rotating internally, does not close the face. It might, if you look at the ball target line, which is in front of me, you could say from this position, the club head path is going towards the ball target line, so it's closing. But we're not talking about closing it relative to the ball target line. When we talk about closing the club face, we're talking about closing it by the club head arc, and that's necessary in the subset of golfers who use a weak or neutral lead hand grip like Scotty Scheffler, Justin Rose, Justin Thomas, Will Zalatoris. They all do it through a lead forearm supination. So, as I said, if you're at this position where it's angled open, like there, parallel to your functional swing plane, notice I can internally rotate it in the manner, look at the back of my hand, forearms rotated just like this motion that Shaun Webb demonstrated. But look at the club face, it's still open. The only way to get this club face to close is there must be another maneuver. Now that other maneuver in a two-arm golf swing, as I described with Scotty Scheffler, is a lead forearm supination. So what happens with the trail wrist during that time period? It performs a counterclockwise trail wrist circumductory motion. So yes, you could close the club face relative to the club head path with a trail wrist circumductory motion, but you can't do it with a global motion of the trail upper arm where you internally rotate it. If you internally rotate your trail upper arm, yes, you can angle your forearm that you're coming to impact looking like this, but the club face will not be squared by this motion independently. And that's something I think that Mike Granato and Shaun Webb and many other golf instructions are oblivious of. Well, I've obviously have a very biased opinion on this issue, but I'm willing to revise my opinions if anyone can show me that I'm wrong. So I highly encourage people to criticize me. In other words, show what I'm saying is wrong-headed or irrational or unscientific, whatever you want to call it, and I will take your criticism seriously. However, I believe that what I'm describing is compatible with what professional golfers are actually doing. Anyway, that's my opinion, and I'll stop the recording.